Okay, so let me start with this. Okay, so I'll be talking much about Azure DevOps, the process of Azure DevOps, and so on and so forth. Please, yesterday I dropped a link on the group that we should try to review on Azure DevOps. I think quite a number of us will have gone through the link. I don't know, but please, have any one of us gone through it? What I sent yesterday. Hello, can anybody hear me? Hello. Okay, so let me share my screen.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, so I was
Yes.
asking a question that I've already gone through what I sent yesterday. Yeah, so reason for doing that because of we to ensure that when we have classes like this, we don't just start talking to the thin air or talking to the heads of people without them having a full knowledge of what is being taught, how is it, what was taught, and so on and so forth, the processes around it. So we always do this to get people prior information about what is being taught. So when we are doing the training session, you can be able to familiarize yourself with the physical uh, hands-on on it. Also, so let me start with Azure DevOps. So what is Azure DevOps, so to speak? So Azure DevOps is a platform owned by Microsoft. So what that platform really does is that it does the process of repository process in terms of building of pipelines, in terms of artifacts, testing, and so on and so forth. So we will go down into it for that information. And firstly, I hope all of us are familiar with GitHub. I believe we are all familiar with GitHub. Looking at GitHub presently is owned by Microsoft, so to speak. But initially, all these things started from TFVS. I don't know, maybe you can read about that initially. It's just Team Foundation. So Team Foundation is just like we have 6, 7 people or 10 developers working together, and we need to synchronize our code together in a repository that we can be able to manage those things. So initially we were using Microsoft was using Team Foundation, so they now upgraded from Team Foundation to use Azure DevOps platform. So the Azure DevOps platform is an upgrade version of the Team Foundation, so to speak. And Azure DevOps is more as even is presently it has a friendly UI UX design. I mean, the visual display is excellent in terms of a get to know person can just walk into it and know about it. I'm going to have a full screen of screen share of that soon, but just bring us heads up on it. So the first document I dropped here is about Azure DevOps, Azure DevOps Server, and so on and so forth. The second one again was the Azure DevOps Labs. So the Azure DevOps Labs does give us insights of everything Azure DevOps does. We have one website here. I don't know, maybe you opened it, Azure DevOps end to end. You can open this also to understand what it really does. And you have continued delivery, CI/CD pipelines, how it works, and so on and so forth. And also, I dropped on that link again here, the benefits of Azure DevOps, which we will talk about later. That is about the flexibility, platform independence, cloud independence, Azure boards, pipelines, and repos, and so on and so forth. So we will come back to explain all these things after I have done a physical uh, uh, display of it. And so when you are reading this thing, it's be able to bring you back to knowledge to understand that, okay, this is how this thing works, and so on and so forth. I hope that that's good. So let me share this screen now to start with. Azure DevOps. Okay. Please, can you see my screen now? This is my screen visible for everybody.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'll be using this platform. Please. This platform is just for learning process, and please, just for us to understand how it works. So this is Azure DevOps front view. So it depends on the organization that owns the platform. So most of the time it is owned by private organizations or any public organizations, but private individuals really don't own Azure DevOps platform because of the cost of of maintaining it and so on and so forth, because you have to pay Microsoft. So people kind of use GitHub, which is free for all kind of. So that's the reason why it's majorly used by organizations. So this is Azure DevOps. So in Azure DevOps, firstly, I'm going to explain this front view page. You have your organizations on the left side. You see where my mouse is. So this is the organizations here. This under each organization, you have something called projects. So projects means that in a company or in a engineering team, you have different projects. For instance, you have a project that deals with loan. You have a project that deals with account maintenance. You have a project that deals with balance and so on. You have a project that deals with saving. So that system means that each project have their own place for them. Like now, you have a project for this, have a project for that, and have a project for and so on and so forth. So I'm going to talk about this app dev project generally for our understanding sake. Is that okay? So in this project, this app project, please is still loading. Yeah. Mm. Okay, so in this project, when you open a project, first thing you will see and you notice here on the left hand side is that you have your overview, you have your boards. So I think some of us are familiar with what they call Jira boards. So this is Azure DevOps boards. So I'm going to talk about it on the later side. We have your repository. Yeah, what GitHub does for you. You have a repository here. You have your pipelines. So you can see you have your pipeline, environment, release, and so on and so forth. I'm going to explain every one of these during this course of study, of training. We have our test plans. I'm just going to run through this, and we have our artifacts. Please, I think we are following. So firstly, the overview. This is how an overview just looks like. An overview is just a statistics data of everything, people that have permission and so on and so forth. This is just an overview of everything. So now we go to dashboards. So dashboard most of the time is really not used, or it is just used for other personal purpose. I want to talk about it at length. And wiki. So what we do majorly in wiki is just like we getting documentation about things and we put it in the wiki. So for instance, you are welcome to a new team. Like you are welcome to team A. In team A, once you are assigned the project of team A. Do you understand? You go to the wiki, read through the documentations that are in the wiki. Okay, how do things work? How to do this thing? How do all those things work? And so on and so forth. All of them are posted in the wiki. Please, do we understand it to that extent? So before I go to click on anything, I go to the wiki, read through the notes. How do I respond to this thing? How do things work? And in some organizations, they will give you like 1 or 2 weeks to read through the wiki before you even start anything. So the wiki contains of the documentation about the organizations and the things they do and what you should do. Do you understand? So that's about the wiki. I won't talk about the specific flow and the living document. So that is that about that. Now I want to talk about the boards. So under the boards, you have a list of things. Please, can we just look at these things? You have your work items, backlogs, sprints, queries, delivery plans, analytic view plans, retrospect, portfolios, and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to explain the initial ones that you should just know about majorly. So in a development team, like a software development team, we will run something called sprints. Sprint means that what is going to be accomplished between a particular duration of time. That's just a layman understanding of it. What should be accomplished within a particular period of time based on the velocity of the team. For instance, we want to build a mobile application that can do transfer, can do save money, can do different kind of thing. We won't start doing everything together. If we do things like that, we wear ourselves out. Please, do you understand? So that thing that we want to do, we are going to divide them into sprints. So sprints are categorized most of the time in development team. They are categorized into two weeks. It's a bi-weekly stuff or a fortnight. So what we do is that, for instance, saying that the sprint starts on a Monday, on the first of the month, on the first of a particular month is on Monday, right? The sprint is going to run for 2 weeks. That means it will run from on the 1st till on the 14th. After on the 14th, we will open another new sprint. We will close that sprint. We'll do retrospective and we will start another new sprint. The new sprint will now run from on the 15th to on the what? On the 30 or 31, any one of these. So, or sorry, on the 29th. We will stop it after that next 2 weeks. We will now start another new sprint. So that's how it works. Sprint runs every 2 weeks. So please just note that for the purpose of learning. And also in sprint, we have, I'm going to just click on sprint so you can look at it. So in sprint we have assignments. Things are assigned to people, you understand? Things are assigned to people. Like for instance, in this board you can see a sprint of things assigned to people. That means these are the things you should do and so on and so forth. So under each things are assigned to you in a particular sprint. So look at this thing I'm saying. Let me click on this. Please, can we look at it here? You see that, you see the sprint is weeks. After this time, you have the new sprint starts in the other time. The new sprint starts on another time, and that's how it goes. That's how all the sprints works. So for a sprint, for instance, a task is assigned to a particular developer. Like now, this one is assigned to all. Let me now choose that it should be assigned to a particular person, like this person. This thing is assigned to this person during this sprint. Do we understand? Now, in this sprint, you now have tasks. You can now create a new task under a particular work item that is given to you. Like now, this work item, I can click on here, click a new sprint, and so on and so forth. You understand? A new item I want to do under a particular task. So once I start doing it, I'll move that item that I'm working into to active. Please, do you understand? Once it is done and the QA has tested and so on and so forth, I will now move it to close. So look at this thing. These boards can be, these palettes can be moved. Can you see the way I'm moving it? These palettes can be moved. So I can move my tags. So from here, from new tags to active, from active to closed, and so on and so forth. So that is how a sprint really works. So in a sprint, in these boards also you have work items. Work items means that what are the things that are assigned to a particular person. You understand? Like now, you have this one is assigned to this team. I don't want to touch this team because of some things I already set up there. So I can choose that, okay, what is assigned to the DevOps community to work on, and so on and so forth. I can now choose it, or I can choose what is the work items that are active, the ones that are new, or the ones that are closed. You understand? This one is majorly for the manager to be able to manage the things that are going on in a sprint and so on and so forth. So we have backlogs. Backlogs are sprints or taxes that are yet to be picked, user stories that are yet to be picked, and the ones that need to be resolved and so on and so forth. So you can see everything in the backlog and so on. So queries. So in some development team, they do run queries. I don't know how I'm going to explain this one to you until when you are having a hands-on it. So that is just about learning of this board. So you can go and read about Azure boards or read about Jira boards on how those things work. But most of the time, they are mainly managed by the manager or the scrum master. So we have a scrum master. A scrum master is somebody that manages the development process, like giving a task, how to schedule a task, how the tasks are assigned, and what are monitoring the sprint, doing retrospective, and looking at what this thing timeline is assigned to a particular task. So the scrum master can talk more about that. But as a DevOps engineer, I won't say you should waste more time and energy in learning the board, but you can learn it for learning purpose. That's it. So now I want to go back to um, Azure repos. So Azure repos talks majorly about repository. When you start writing a code on your local machine, you understand? You pick that code and you push it towards a repository. Because something Git process, what Git process does is that it manage code integration within team members and code management. That's majorly about it. So for instance, yeah, a branch, you have a repository. We have inside that repository, you have something called branches. Do we get that? This is a repository. Look at this is a repository. Do we understand? These are many repositories. Under in the individual repository, you have branches. Do you see it? We have different branches under individual repository. For instance, I have a project that I want to do as a what? A developer. I go to the development branch. I branch out from the development branch to create my own new branch, Ewuji John branch. I start working from my branch. Once I'm done with what I'm doing in my branch, I push my code from my personal branch to the development branch. Do we get that? From the development branch, the code will be pushed to the development environment. We'll talk about CI/CD pipelines, the automation at the later course of this training. From the development environment, they can push the code from the development branch to what? To the sandbox branch, or we call it a pilot branch. From the pilot branch, you can push the code from what? The pilot branch, once the testing UAT has been done and so on and so forth, we now push it to the master branch. What is in the master branch is what now goes to the production environment. Please, do we get that? Now, so the next thing again I will talk about, yeah, I think we are good with the files in your repository, right? I'm not going to talk about commits. So commits is just like a tree. Can you see it? We have a main branch. A main branch. This is the master branch. This one in the left side. Can you see this graph? People are branching out. Look at this, for instance. People branch out of this master branch to create their own branch to this branch, and so on and so forth. So that's how people migrate from one branch to another branch and come back to the main branch again. So it's that main branch that now goes back to what? To production. So that I'm looking for right terms to explain it, but just understand the branching system. You can go and read about the Git branching system uh online, so you can get a good understanding on it. So when a commit is done, like commit is just like me pushing my code from a particular repository to another repository. When the commit is done, there's always a hash that's attached to a commit, a unique identifier attached to a commit. It's just like a tag that's attached to a commit. For instance, look at this commit. You see that there's this ID that's under it here. Can you see this thing like CAE 9D873? It's just like a hash that's attached. Can you see that the hash is different in every of the commits? They are just different. So that is how commits work. So, like for instance, now I want to know what really happened when this commit was done. I can click on this commit, and it is going to tell me, okay, what happened when I did this commit, and so on and so forth. Do we understand? Now, we are going back to push. This is just like the pull request and so on and so forth. I don't talk about it much. So now let's talk about branches. So branches, we have different branch. So I've explained branches initially when I was talking about files. So the main branch usually used to be the master branch. Like the main branch is our default branch, is the master branch, and after that you have all branches. Can you see we have series of branches? Do we get it? But the master branch is what is the main branch, and after that, when you want to create a branch, you can branch out of a particular branch to create a new branch. For instance, I'm clicking on the create a new branch. From this branch, I can create a new branch like new branch. But the branch I'm creating is out of what? Which kind from which branch am I branching out? Sorry, the thing looks like a tautology, but it's that's how the thing is seriously. So we have a branch. I am branching out of a branch. Do you understand? I want to update a code in production. The code in production is in the master branch. Before I update that code in production, I can't just begin to work on master branch like that. No, I will have to branch out of master branch, make my code, test my code, and so on and so forth. Once I am done with that, I will now make a pull request back to my what? Master branch. Please, do we get that concept? So that is how our branching system works, and you can read about it. And also, when creating a branch, the ideal things to do is to create a work item, add a work item to it. So when I was explaining the boards and so on and so forth, I talked about work items and tasks assigned to people, right? Like now, I want to create a new branch. I'm talking about, okay, this is the task that is assigned to me. I'll click on it. So based on that task, I'm creating a new branch. Do we understand? I want to do a particular task. I'm tagging that task to that branch, this new branch that I'm creating. Please, I hope we understand it. Now, I would have loved to talk about tags, but we'll talk about it later. Maybe when we have an advanced class and we're talking about uh, semantic versioning process, then I think I will talk about tags and so on and so forth. So I've talked about pull request, PR. You can read it on. So this that's that about that. So let's now go down to pipelines. Please, anybody having any question for now based on the things I've talked about? Hello? Can anybody hear me?
So we might have question, oh, but the question is going to come when we start doing it ourselves.
So I
Yes.
won't I won't
And
want it
from
to
there,
be
I
bored.
think we might be having
Uh,
one or two issues, and that is where we're going to throw our questions.
you having questions?
So
Okay, okay,
I don't know
mhm,
how much time we've got left. Is there a
okay.
way we can create a small project or section class where we can do one or two individually or something? I'm just
Uh,
thinking
oh,
if we would have that time or that space to do that.
I think we will do that. Maybe one of our sections we will have to do that, or we'll throw it up to the group. But
Okay.
the reason why I'm talking about that is because initially when I was explaining, I talked about the cost attached. So most of the things in cloud involve cost. Please, do you understand?
Yeah, sure.
So so if we are having I think we'll have one class that will talk about how to get Microsoft free subscription and so on and so forth. A $200. I read the class last week. I talked about it also. There's a $200 free subscription that Microsoft gives. We'll talk about that in one of our sections. But till then, most of these things are paid versions. Do you understand?
Yeah, thanks.
And on the free version, there are limited things you can actually do.
Do
And
okay.
also I'm going to drop. I'll try to get a video about Azure DevOps generally also, and I'll drop it in the group so you can be able to watch it, and you can even fast forward it to the section that you want to learn about. So I think that's about that. Okay, let's move on with pipelines. Okay, so want to talk about pipelines. So we have pipelines. What do pipelines really do? Firstly, pipelines are scripts, that are run by the by the agents. What I mean by agents is that virtual machines. You understand? I'm going to be using the term interchangeably. So scripts are run by virtual machines or agents. What the pipelines really do is uh, giving a process flow on what should be done as regards to a particular code. Do you get it? I'm having a code in a repository. That code won't just go into somebody's phone or won't just go into a server and just start working just like that. No, it needs to be built. So building a code is like adding cement, water, sand together to form a concrete. Please, do we get that concept? I'm trying to use the lowest term uh, to be able to carry everybody along. So there's a proportion of cement that need to be added, a proportion of sand that need to be added, a proportion of water that needs to be added, and mixed together to form a concrete. Do you understand? So you don't just carry the cement and go and pour it on the place you are building, or carry the water and just pour it like that and expect to get a concrete. No, you have to build it, mixing it together. So that is what the build process actually does. So in build processes, in Azure DevOps, we have two types of build processes. We have the classic method and you have the YAML method. So I will talk about that, the two. So firstly, I will talk about the classic method. All the pipelines here are not classic method, but I will just give you an instance of how a classic method is done. So for instance, new pipeline, I won't be so let's just try to pay attention. So I'm having I want to use a classic method. You see this classic editor. I'm going to click on this use classic editor method. Where is my code? Please, can we see it? Where is my code? Azure DevOps gives you the privilege to connect to different repositories to pull your code. For instance, I have my code in Azure repository here. If my code is in GitHub, I can point it to GitHub. If my code is in GitHub Enterprise Server, it is in Subversion or Bitbucket or other Git versions like GitLab and so on and so forth, I can select them. Yeah, do you understand? Now I can now choose the project. I talked about projects initially when I was talking about the repos. Can we still remember? I talked about the repositories. No, sorry, I talked about projects at the initial part of it when I talked about project given to loan, project to savings, and account maintenance. Please let's try to remember those things. I talked about repository when I talked about the different repository that exists inside a project. Also, I talked about branch. Do you understand? Now I will choose. We have a DevOps the thing. Yeah, that I can use. Yeah, let me use this one. So I want to use this repository called DevOps optimization. I'm working from the main branch. You understand? All branches. I think we have two. Okay, so you have main branch. Continue. Can you see it? It's going to ask me that do I want to use a YAML file or so on and so forth. I want to start it with an empty job. Can you see the classic mode, how it looks like? Now I can now say, okay, what do I want the agent? Let me start with this. Oh, God. We have what are we doing here? We are creating a build pipeline. Can you see it? Which pipelines should we run? We have different agents that we can choose. we can choose to have our agents based on us, like a organization. Some organizations host their agents themselves. That means they have a virtual machine that is hosted by them. That means they are the one that own that virtual machine. It may be in the cloud or maybe in their own office, maybe one server in their office, and so on and so forth. They will choose the pipeline, sorry, the agents they want to use. And most of the time, it's just easier when you have to use Azure pipeline, meaning that it's Microsoft that hosts the agents or virtual machine used in this respect. Now, I can now choose the kind of OS that agent runs with, or I can choose maybe to run with a Mac OS, or it runs with Ubuntu, that's Linux OS, or it runs with Windows OS. Please, do you get that subject? And this is just talking as regards to the pipeline. This source, we have talked about this get source initially. The next thing we want to talk about is agent jobs. Please look at this plus sign, mean that what tasks do I want to do? Do I want to build a .NET application? Use it. If I want to build a .NET application, for instance, I can click on add. It's going to bring out a task. Please note, a task for building a .NET application. I'm going to talk about the tasks. So in Azure pipelines, we have some crucial things you should know. We have I'll talk about those things when I'm talking about the YAML side of things. So, but in this aspect, I'll just talk about it briefly so I can explain it more in the YAML aspect of it. So, you have your .NET build. For instance, I want to build a code in .NET. I can now choose, okay, what do I want to do? .NET build, choose the source manager. Okay, I want to build it for Microsoft Enterprise, blah, 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 blah. And also, the command I want to do is build this application. You understand? I'll click on build. The path to what I want to build, what are the processes I want to call. For instance, I'm building a containerized application. I can say, okay, let me do um, a Docker build. I'm building a containerized application, for instance. I'll say add. I want to build this Docker application. I can say, okay, which container registry am I building it to? The container repository. The command I want to do is going to say maybe it's a build and push process. Can we see it? So what are the processes that I really want these tasks to do? I can say, okay, where is the Docker file that I will use to build the process and so on. If there's a Docker file, I click on Docker file and click on OK. And also the tags for it and so on and so forth. Please note, these things that I am explaining are based on what I want to build. If I want to build a backend application, will be different from how I'm going to build a front-end application. And it will be different from if I want to build an application to an exe file, or I want to build a Dockerized application, or I want to build any type of application. If I'm building a Java application, also it will be different. I'll use Maven and so on. If I want to build a C# or .NET application, the way I'll build it will be different. Please, so we should just understand that this build process is dependent on the type of application I'm building. Please, let's note that also. So after building it, I can now choose the kind of tasks I want to do. Maybe I want to publish the application, or I want to download a build artifact, or I want to do any kind of thing. I can choose from any of these tasks to say, okay, I want to do something. I want to build to App Center. I want to build any kind of thing. We have 1,001 tasks in Azure DevOps. So it's kind of easier using Azure DevOps to say, okay, this is what we are building and we are building it correctly. Please, do we get to this concept? Do you get this concept? Right. Okay, I believe we get to that. So now I'm not going to be saving it because I told you that it's just for training purpose. So I'm going to go to building a pipeline in YAML format. So I talked about we having two formats. You can use the classic mode or you can use the YAML file method. So initially I talked about using the classic editor mode. Now I want to talk about using a YAML file method. So there are two types of YAML file, kind of. They are almost similar. You understand? So when you are building there are different types of YAML file, but all of them are almost similar. They follow the same sequence process. When you are building a YAML file for Azure repository, Azure DevOps, the YAML file is kind of different than when you are building it for Bitbucket. Bitbucket has some contingencies around it. I don't know, maybe any one of you have used it before. I have used it. So I can tell you it's kind of different. Like when you are building a Docker image in Bitbucket, you have to add some dependencies also to it. When you are building with GitHub also has its own difference, but it's kind of user friendly in compared to other one. So GitHub and GitHub Enterprise, they are actually almost the same product. So the YAML files of all of them looks similar. If you understand the concept of one of them, I think you can use that same concept for the mini repository and their build processes. So now I'm going to be using for Azure DevOps. Good. So the next thing is going to ask me, I should select the repository. I've talked about repository initially. So let me just look up for DevOps optimization. So it's going to ask me that, do I have an existing pipeline or do I want to create a new pipeline? So let me start with a new pipeline because I have an existing pipeline there before. Start the pipeline. Okay, so let me now explain what it did initially. It analyzes my code, the code that is there. So based on the code, if I'm having a .NET application code or a C# code in my repository, it's going to analyze the pipeline to build for a what? A C# code. I've talked about that initially. Depending on the type of code that you have there. If you're having a JavaScript, it will analyze it to build a code that is going to build a JavaScript code like maybe Nest.js and so on and so forth. So it's going to analyze the code you have, and you can now do the other additional settings to it. Sorry. So now I will add this assistant to it. So you can look at what I was talking about when I was talking about the classic method and the YAML method. So in the classic method, you know that most of these things were not in code version. They were just drag and drop, do some settings manually, you understand, and you are done. But in the YAML method, you have to write literal real YAML codes, like real codes and statements. Like for instance, my trigger of pipeline means that what happens to my pipeline, how do my pipeline come to work automatically? For instance, here I'm saying that once there's a change in my main branch, the code in my main branch, let this pipeline run. Please, do you understand what I said? Trigger means that once there's a change in the particular repository I'm mentioning here, let this pipeline what? Run. If I have a development branch, for instance, and I want it to run based on my development branch, I can now say, okay, based on my trigger, run on my once there's a change in my development branch, let this pipeline what? Trigger. That's mean let this pipeline what? Run. The next thing again is going to be my pull. Initially, when I was talking about the classic method, I talked about choosing maybe Windows or Mac OS or Linux, Ubuntu, and so on and so forth. So this is where I make the choose in the YAML method. Because for our time, I'll just run fast about it. So we have steps. Steps means that, okay, what are the steps I want this pipeline, these agents to do? That means I dictate what I want the virtual machine to do to my code. That means the things it should do, what are the proportion of sand it should add, the proportion of water it should add, the proportion of cement it should add to build my code. So this is what I do by saying the steps. Okay, run this script, hello world, display name of that script should be this, and so on. You have different kind of scripts. Let me now give you an instance again. For instance, I want to add a new tax. This one's are scripts. I want to add a tax. Please note a tax. I want to add a tax for building a .NET application that I talked about initially. Look at the .NET application. I want you to do the service connection, connect to this particular thing. The command I want you to do is just normal build. You understand? I want you to just let me do run and so on and so forth. ABS. So the argument will be this and that and timeout and so on and so forth, and click on add. Can you see that it's created a new task for me? Please, do you understand? So it's running against this Azure subscription. The command is to run the project. This is the project it is running. This is the argument you should put in when running the pipeline. So the agent is going to pick this my task and use that same task process to build the code. It may look like a big gibberish or this thing. It's just what it is. Sorry, please. I'm just trying to use a simple what would I call it? A simple terminology to be able to carry people along with it. But please don't be angry. It may look gibberish kind of. Also, so we have different kind of tags. The other one again I talked about then was the one of Docker. For instance, I want to do one for Docker. So let me no Control Z. Okay, I want to do a new task for Docker. I want to build this to Docker, the container registry, this is it, container repository, blah blah blah, and I click on add. Can you see it? So, oh, hello, Babatunde, please can you just mute yourself and your camera is on. Your camera is on. Yeah, thank you. So you have like I want to build a Docker image. I can say, okay, do this, and do this. This is where my Docker file is. This is what I want you to build and push, and so on and so forth. So this is the difference between a classic method and a YAML method. And please note, the classic method is kind of fading out. So please, when you are learning Azure DevOps, please, you can learn the two together, but please put more attention to the YAML method, because in most organizations, the YAML method is now more preferable. And also another thing again you can learn. Yeah, I know, because I didn't save this, I would have showed you triggers, how to edit pipelines and so on. But let me just look for one. I think I used to have one. Okay, yes. So see this pipeline, for instance. Now this is the pipeline. I can say, okay, I want to edit this pipeline. This pipeline is written in a YAML method. This is the process of the pipeline. Can you see it? Please don't be scared of code. Please, I'm begging. Those are the things that make people run away from this process. So don't be scared of the code. It may look gibberish to you, but with time, it's going to make more sense. So this is the code for this whole process. I can now say, okay, I want to edit some things that doesn't involve YAML file. Yeah, I can just click on these three. Also for variables, like for instance, I have a variable here. Let me just show you one variable. I have one. I don't think I do. Yeah, I think I commented this one out. This variable. For instance, if I have a variable here, I can go here and say, okay, this variable, this is the variable. You understand? This is the variable. This is the value of the variable, and so on and so forth. We may talk about variable in other times, so it should not be poured out. And also, if you want to edit the pipeline, there are settings, validate, download full YAML file, and the triggers, and so on and so forth. So this is majorly on the build pipeline kind of side of things. Now, the release pipeline is talking about the deployment pipeline. Please, it's called CICD. CICD. I'll drop it on this chart so you can read up on it. So CICD pipelines, or why can't I use the chat? Okay. CID. So CICD pipeline. So what it means is that continuous integration and continuous deployment. Please, do we get it? Continuous integration and continuous deployment. So what this literally means is that what? Continuous integration is where I build the code. Continuous deployment is in the process of deploying that thing I built into an environment. Please, do we get that concept? I built a code, mix sand, water, and cement together. That is CI. Deploy it is that I'm taking it to use to make a concrete for a decking, or making it, deploying that concrete, that cement and so on, what I built, deploying it to creating a bridge, or deploying it to creating a slab, or deploying it to creating, what do I want to create? Please, do we get the concept? So deployment is taking it to the environment where I want to use it. CI is building it, is mixture or mixing of all those things together, and deployment is taking what I have mixed and putting it to form one particular type of concrete, or what I want to use it to form. You understand? So now, CD, continuous deployment. For instance, when you have CD, you can CD, that's continuous deployment. You can say, okay, I want to deploy this thing. For instance, I want to create one. I don't want to edit any one of these. Continuous deployment. First thing first, is going to ask me, so what uh, what do I want to deploy? Can you see my screen? What do I want to deploy? Am I deploying it to an app service in Azure? Am I deploying it to a Node.js app service? Which kind of deployment am I deploying? Am I deploying to an IaaS service? IaaS service means that deploying to a virtual machine. You understand? A web service to a virtual machine. So that's IaaS service. Please, we'll talk about virtual machines, maybe one of our class sections. So am I deploying it to an APIM, or I'm deploying it to a scale virtual machine scale set, or any kind of thing? Please, do you know when I was talking about, okay, when I'm deploying to form a cement slab, a concrete slab, or I am deploying it to form a bridge, or I am deploying it to form a decking. So this is what it is like. For instance, I want to deploy to a, sorry please. I'm sorry, please. Server house. Okay. For instance, I want to deploy to a Kubernetes cluster. You see, can you see deploy to a what? A Kubernetes cluster. Let me just use that as an example. I want to deploy it to a Kubernetes cluster. We have stage. I will talk about stage, the stage owner, blah 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 blah. I'll talk about this later. So firstly, we must connect our CI to a CD. Let me just note that one down. CI and a connection. I'm dropping in the chat the connection to our CD. Okay, I've dropped that in the chat. So we have CI and we have connection to what? To our CD. So for instance, this is where we make a connection to our CD, from our CI to our CD. This artifact here is what we got from our CI. The mixture of our sand and cement and water is our artifact. It forms something called an artifact. I don't know what they call it in bricklaying. Maybe it's a concrete, or who knows the right term of that mixture when you mix everything together. I don't know what they call it. I'm sorry. So when they mix everything together, it forms what in our own terms in DevOps is called an artifact. So that artifact, you can click on this. Okay, I want artifacts that comes out of which pipeline, which project. It tells the project which build pipeline do I want that artifact from. I want the artifact from DevOps. Sorry, it must be a drop down. I want it to come from DevOps optimization pipeline. Do you understand? The latest build, what is the latest build from the DevOps artifact pipeline? I want that to be my artifact. You understand? So in some given situations, you can have multiple artifacts to one deployment pipeline. For instance, I can click on, okay, I want on the artifact, another artifact. You see it? This artifact will not be cache. Let me scroll this down. Okay. I want any artifact that comes from this cache also to be my artifact. That is in some given situations. But most of the time, it's just best to just have one pipeline, one build pipeline for a release pipeline and so on. Let me just remove this from the, let me just remove this. So okay, so this our artifact. This our artifact. I'm on a call. So this our artifact. Next thing again we want to have is our stages. This is our deployment process. This whole thing I'm circling here, our deployment process. Firstly, we can have what is called clicking on this side, we have what is called pre-deployment conditions. What are the things that should be done before I deploy this thing? For instance, I can say that, please, before you deploy this thing, I want this thing to be done with an approval. You understand? I can say, okay, I want this so person to approve this thing before it is being deployed. Please, do you understand? And if the approval is not done between this amount of dates, cancel this deployment. That's number one. Outside, we have another thing we call gates. Gates is the delay time. Okay, what when a deployment is done, after how long time should this thing be done? And sometimes you have the gates to be 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes before the deployment will be done. You understand? That is where deployment gates come to play. And you can add more deployment gates to it and so on. And you have deployment queue settings. I don't want to bore you with all these things. Triggers, what are the things that trigger it and so on. So let's just ignore all this for now. Let's go straight to our pipeline, our deployment pipeline. Here is it. Deployment pipeline, and I say, okay, I want to say that this stage, what should it be? I can say, okay, give it any name I want to give it to. Agent job. I talked about agents. Then I mentioned agents similar to virtual machines. Okay. So which kind of agent do I want to use? Do I want to use an Azure agent or this thing? I talked about that in the build pipeline. I can now say which kind of agent give conditions for my build agents and so on and so forth. After that, these are taxes for the deployment process. I want to deploy this to a Kubernetes cluster. Do you understand? Now, this is a display name. This display name is what is showing here. So I can now say, okay, which Kubernetes cluster do I want to deploy to? We have based on the environment you are deploying to, I can select the kind of the cluster I want to deploy to. The namespace, maybe it's a default namespace. Maybe when we are having advanced classes talking about Kubernetes and so on, please don't be bored about it for now. And the commands of what we want to do, or I want to apply, kubectl apply, create, delete, execute, and so on and so forth. And also my arguments. My argument, I can say command F and choosing other things and so on and so forth. So maybe for instance, I want to deploy a secret container registry name, the connection between the container registry and so on and so forth. So I don't want to bore you with all these processes, but just know that these are taxes for deployments. For instance, now I want to deploy after that. I want to deploy to my virtual app service. So, okay, let me give you a space. I want to deploy to Azure App Service. You understand? I can click on this, deploy to your app service, this and this and this and this, the display name, the connection type, which app service am I deploying to? I want to deploy to this particular app service. You get it? Is it a Windows app service or a Linux app service? The app service name and so on and so forth. So I've talked about that. If you are deploying to a slab or deploying to a bridge or which kind of thing. So that's that about that. Outside that, again, there's something we call variables. I talked about variables initially when I was talking about build pipeline. These are where we can put our variables for this. And we have our retention policy. We have the options and you have history. So this history shows you who worked on this pipeline. When was this pipeline worked on? So in Azure DevOps, people you don't just go there and do things and say that nobody sees me. So to speak, it's either you delete that thing, because when we click on the history, it gives us an audit log of who did something and when was it done. So that's that about that. Also, I'm done with the CI and CD. I'll talk about environment. Leave. Um, while we wrap up as fast as we can. So we have environment. So the environment I'm deploying to and so on. We can just ignore this for now because it's not mainly used. I will talk about library. So library does talk about variable groups. Variable groups means that oh, did I show you something? Okay, let me yeah, let me this. So when we're talking about variable, we have this thing called variable group. Can you see it? This variable group, you can link a variable group. These are the variable groups. You understand? You can create a new variable group and say, okay, this variable group. You can now list the names or the list of variables. Yeah, instead of we coming here and listing variables manually, I can choose a variable group and link a pipeline to a variable group. Do you understand? I can link one variable group to several pipelines. So for instance, I don't want to be putting variables in different positions, you understand, in different pipelines. I can create one variable group and link all those pipelines to that variable group instead of me going to put that same variable in every pipeline. So if I'm changing the variable, I'm just changing it in one place and every pipeline uses that same variable. So that's what the library does. So the task group also is just this. So we have the deployment groups. So the deployment groups talk about the virtual machines and where am I deploying to. For instance, we have different deployment groups. Yeah, we can read about that later because all these things are personal. So now the test plans, this one are majorly for the testers, so I don't want to bore you about that. And in some situations, in some pipelines, they can just comment this out, so you won't be able to view it. So don't bore yourself out about it. So artifacts. Okay. So artifacts talk about feeds are used. Sorry, I didn't talk about templates when I was talking about the CI pipeline. There's something called templates, but it's in an advanced level. So templates is just like you having a YAML file. A YAML file that you call in YAML file. For instance, you are referencing a particular class. Oh, sorry. I'm going deep in what I'm explaining. So you are referencing a particular pipeline in another pipeline. So that is what template means. So all these feeds, some of these things are the things that you reference in your build pipelines and so on. So I don't want to bore you with it. So these are the things I can just talk about majorly in Azure DevOps. And anybody that has any question, please questions while we wrap up. Is anybody with any question? Anybody with any question, please? Or a comment or anything, please. I think I'm good for now.
Sorry. Thank you for your time actually. So I actually joined the meeting, I think 15 minutes late. And from your this thing, I could see that what you were using is Azure DevOps Surgical. Am I right? Are you there?
Surgical is just an organization in Azure
Oh,
DevOps.
okay. That is the one customized for your organization, yeah?
Yes.
Oh. Because I was a bit, I was quite confused. Like, why am I seeing Azure DevOps Surgical and all of that? So it's quite confusing. So that's just what I feel. So does it mean that if you have an Azure account, yeah, you can customize your environment to show the name of the organization on the, what is it called, on your address bar? Because that is actually where I got that from.
Okay. So yes, when you have answered the question actually, when you have your own paid version of it,
Version,
you
yeah.
can customize anything you want to do.
Okay. That was just my concern anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yeah, anybody with any other question?
Yeah. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, sir.
Thank you, sir. So my question is about basically the CD, the continuous deployment. So continuous deployment doesn't use YAML. It's just more of configuration, right?
Yes, to an extent, you are correct, kind of, yes. But not depend on the condition. So in some cases, you can do your deployment process also in your build pipeline.
Oh,
Do we get? So,
yeah.
but in an ideal environment, create your deployment process separately in your release pipeline. Do you understand?
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any other question? Anybody with any other question? Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for coming, and thanks for the time spent. Much appreciated. So I think the link for the video will be hopefully be dropped in the group. And please, if